My daughter urgently requested my presence, expressing concern about her mother's involvement with someone else. Despite the distance, I could discern her distress through the grainy video quality. I learned that my wife spent several nights a week with a man named Donald Connolly, the mayor, known for his big fancy car and occasional limo rides. Stacy, my daughter, shared details about his appearance and confirmed her fear about the situation, prompting me to assure her that I would try to come home. Stacy pleaded for my swift return, emphasizing the need for discretion in dealing with her mother. I promised to do my best, expressing love for her before ending the conversation. My name is Robert Crawford. I'm 42 years old and a design specialist for a large electronics firm. I'm also a major in the National Guard, and that's why I'm currently on a year-long assignment in Afghanistan, where I serve on the command staff. I've been married to the love of my life, Kathy, for 18 years, and the fruit of our union is our awesome 15-year-old daughter, Stacy. Kathy is 40 but looks even younger. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever known. 5'6" 6 inches, terrific body that actually improved after she gave birth to our daughter. Her dark brown hair down to her shoulders, and warm brown eyes that always sparkle when she smiles. And she smiles all the time. I could honestly say our marriage has been rock solid. Even when I've been deployed, our time together has been warm and loving, our lovemaking hot and always satisfying. I've never had a doubt about her fidelity, nor she mine. So what happened? I didn't have a clue. I completed all the necessary paperwork for 30 days of emergency family leave and caught a flight that 26 hours later found me renting a car at my hometown airport and heading for home. On Friday night around 6:30, I parked the car half a block from my house. The mid-November sun had set, and the streetlights cast an ominous glow on the neighborhood. Lights were on in the living room, kitchen, and upstairs master suite. I observed my wife moving around the house, appearing to get ready to go out. I discreetly called my daughter's cell phone, and she answered after 3 rings, speaking softly. I reassured her and asked if her mother was going out. She confirmed that her mother had been in her room for over an hour, heard the shower, and sensed her excitement for the night. Stacy expressed her dismay, wondering why her mother was putting the family through this. I advised against passing judgment until we knew the full story. Stacy asked about my plans, and I mentioned that I intended to follow them and assess the situation before deciding how to respond. She urged caution and asked if I needed to change clothes. I declined, mentioning that my camo fatigues would suffice for the occasion. We exchanged expressions of love, and I assured Stacy that we would always be together, regardless of the circumstances. At 7, a black Mercedes rolled into my driveway, and a tall, slender, well-dressed man emerged from the car. I anticipated him heading to the door, but instead, he conversed on his cell phone, and the lights in the master suite went dark. A minute later, the door opened, and my wife stepped onto the porch. She ensured the door locked behind her and briskly walked toward her date, wearing a big smile. Despite looking stunningly beautiful, my heart shattered when I saw her glance back at the house to make sure Stacy wasn't watching. Then, she shared a warm kiss with the mayor before he helped her into the car, and they drove away. Fortunately, I remained composed enough to capture the kiss with my cell phone. I followed them at a safe distance, encountering no issues due to the light traffic. They crossed town and arrived at the Radisson Hotel's parking lot. Parking a few spaces away, I observed as they exited the car and entered the building. Walking closely with arms around each other, I snapped another photo, revealing the evident long-term nature of their affair. They appeared so comfortable together, resembling a loving married couple on a date night. I waited until they entered the hotel before donning my camo hat and sunglasses, trailing behind them. Once inside, I couldn't see them, but it didn't concern me. I received the usual smiles and "thank you for your service" comments, which I acknowledged while checking the information board listing current events. One event stood out: the St. James Hospital charity ball on the 3rd floor, with live orchestra music filtering down to the lobby. Disregarding the elevators transporting couples to the ballroom, I opted for the stairs, avoiding swift detection and acknowledging the need for exercise after long flights. On the 3rd floor, I followed the music and easily found the ballroom. Passing the entrance, I glimpsed them inside, acting like the happy couple they portrayed, greeting friends and supporters. My wife briefly looked back at me, but there was no recognition. As far as she knew, I was still 10,000 miles away, facing flies, sandstorms, and the Taliban. I also noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding rings. After passing the entrance, I entered the men's room, sat in a stall, and contemplated my next moves. It was challenging to grasp what I had seen. I had been certain my marriage with Kathy was as solid as any could be. I felt foolish. While honoring my duty in Afghanistan, my loving wife was at home, dishonoring me, breaking our wedding vows. What was wrong with the people they were meeting? Didn't they realize the woman hanging on the mayor was married to an army officer serving overseas? Warm tears ran down my cheek, but I wiped them away. No time for self-pity. I had a plan to formulate and execute. At that moment, a much different enemy needed to be faced than the Taliban. Remaining in the bathroom stall for half an hour, I allowed the festivities to reach full swing before approaching the ballroom door. Only a few people at the entrance noticed me as I edged close to the wall and walked slowly to an area away from the bar and food tables. Behind a pillar, I had a clear view of most of the room. Although I lacked a ticket for the event, my uniform held more clout than any piece of paper. The young man taking tickets saluted me and said, "Welcome, sir," as I entered. The thought crossed my mind. It's unfortunate my wife and her lover don't show that kind of respect for me in the uniform I wear. It took me a few minutes to locate Kathy and her date. They were dancing to a slow song, my wife's arms around his neck, her head against his chest, his hands resting possessively on her bottom. I managed to take several photos, but it took all my willpower to keep from rushing onto the floor and decking the guy and kicking his balls up into his kidneys. However, that would only give me a little satisfaction and likely put me in jail. What I wanted, what I needed, was absolute proof of their affair, and then I would find an appropriate way to exact revenge for their total disrespect of me, our daughter, and the U.S. Army. They danced another dance. Then, arm in arm, they made their way to their table, sharing in faithful kiss and caress before they sat down. I captured it all in photos. Having seen enough for the moment, I made my way out to the hallway and found a seat where I could watch the ballroom doors and the elevators. As an Army officer, I had learned patience, and it paid off, since another 2 hours went by before the event began to wind down, and people made their way out the door and down the elevators. It wasn't long before my wife and the mayor made their exit and stood just outside the door, talking. After a minute, they smiled at each other and turned together to the bank of elevators on their left, but instead of pushing the down button, they chose the one that would take them up. It was more than weird. I was only about 15 feet from them, sitting on a bench against the wall, wearing my camo fatigues and sunglasses, my name tag clearly displayed on the front of my uniform, looking totally out of place amid the tuxedos and ball gowns. And though many other couples noticed me and smiled or waved, my wife and her lover were so tuned into each other that they never gave me a glance. Observing them entering the elevator holding hands, I noted that their car stopped on the 11th floor. After confirming it didn't go up again and returned to the 3rd floor, where more couples were waiting, I headed back to the registration desk. I explained to the attendant that I had an urgent message for Mayor Connolly and showed my government ID, requesting his room number. Despite initial hesitation, she eventually disclosed that he was in room 1114. Thanking her, I took the elevator to the 11th floor and located room 1114. After checking the hallway for other occupants, I pressed my ear against the door, hearing only soft conversation. Unsatisfied, I proceeded down the hall, found the door to the stairs, and secured it with my handkerchief to prevent it from locking. Glancing at my watch, I noted it was midnight, as Stacy had mentioned. Her mother usually came home between 2 and 3, and once lately at 7, so I had a long wait. But again, my Army training and patience paid off. Through the window in the door, I could see room 1114, so I wouldn't miss them when they were done with their lovemaking fest. As I waited, I tried to keep my mind on the task at hand, but the truth is, I kept imagining her a-hole lover, plunging his tool deep into my wife who had pledged to be mine alone. I could say my heart was broken, but it went far beyond that. I could feel my life spiraling down into a dark abyss where only pain and rejection and humiliation left. I knew I had to keep myself composed for my daughter's sake, but the realization that the woman I loved more than anything else on earth, whom I trusted with every fiber of my being, was at that very moment giving her body and soul, her love and passion to another man, overwhelmed me with a tidal wave of pain. Around 1:30, I stepped out of the stairwell and pressed my ear against their door, hearing faint sounds that resembled moaning. Then I distinctly heard my wife exclaiming, "Yes, oh God, yes! Do me, Dawn! Do me hard like that! You're so good!" she screamed, a sound I had heard many times before during faithful moments with me. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I returned to the stairwell, anticipating they would conclude soon and leave their love nest within the next hour. I exited the stairwell for the final time at 2, positioning myself against the wall outside their room, ready to capture their exit on my cell phone's video. 15 minutes later, I heard the chain being removed and the door click open, and I began recording as they emerged. He had his arm protectively around her, and she leaned against him, smiling. Kathy looked freshly scrubbed and well-groomed, while Donald Connolly appeared pleased with himself. They kissed briefly, turned towards the elevators, and Kathy noticed me leaning against the wall. I confronted Kathy about her actions, questioning how her rendezvous with her lover went. Upon realizing my presence, Kathy appeared shocked, placing her hand on her heart and expressing disbelief. She fell to her knees, pleading that this wasn't supposed to happen and that I wasn't meant to see it. Her lover, taking a moment to register the situation, insisted that it wasn't what it seemed and that Kathy was merely assisting with his new campaign. I sarcastically remarked on the irony of such campaign tactics involving infidelity. I questioned the mayor's morality, highlighting the impact on my marriage while I was away serving the country. The mayor attempted to deny any closeness involvement, urging Kathy to corroborate his story. Disregarding his plea, Kathy rejected his attempt to manipulate the situation, recounting the witnessed kissing, moaning, and phrases heard through the door. I conceded defeat, acknowledging that my wife was now his. Expressing frustration and calling them both cowards, I emphasized that even my daughter was aware of their actions. The mayor stood there, stunned and unsure how to respond, while my wife knelt on the floor, sobbing. I informed Kathy not to bother coming home that night and suggested she spend it with her lover instead. I mentioned my intention to comfort our daughter and stated that on Monday I would file for divorce, followed by informing the news media. Expressing my frustration about the mayor's actions in running the city, I instructed Kathy to stay away until I returned from my 30-day emergency leave, after which she could decide how to proceed with her life. Kathy pleaded with me, asking for forgiveness for her infidelity during my deployment and requesting not to disclose it to our daughter, who already knew about the situation. I expressed my confusion over her actions, but acknowledged that they had chosen each other. Disheartened, I left for the elevator as Kathy apologized, but I couldn't find it in me to accept her remorse. Observing their apparent happiness together, I left them with a harsh farewell and stepped into the elevator, leaving them behind. When I arrived home, I found Stacy waiting for me, clearly upset. She embraced me tightly, expressing how much she had missed me. I reassured her of my own feelings and confirmed that I had found her mother and the mayor together. Stacy affirmed that she wasn't concerned about her mother's absence, stating that she had felt neglected in her absence. She pleaded to come with me when I returned to Afghanistan, but I explained that she needed to stay here. Stacy insisted that she couldn't stay with her mother, expressing her resentment towards her. Despite her feelings, I reminded her that her mother was still her mother. Stacy tearfully expressed her belief that her mother didn't love her and sought comfort in my arms. I held her as she cried. I finally convinced Stacy to go to bed, and I secured the house, including setting the door chains just in case Kathy decided to try to come home. I had no proof that Kathy and her lover had used any of our bedrooms for their trysts, but I didn't want to take a chance, so I slept on the couch, even though I wasn't sure they hadn't had lovemaking there either. Sleep came only in spurts, 45 minutes here, half an hour there. I kept thinking about how I would handle the situation when Kathy came to claim her clothes and personal items she'd need until I left in 30 days. I could have been a nice guy and taken a hotel room, leaving the house to her, but I just couldn't find it in my heart to be that nice. She was the one that destroyed our marriage so she could at least suffer the minor inconvenience of being displaced from her home for a month. Besides, I'm certain her lover would be happy to put her up. They've been acting like a married couple now. They could live like one for a while, call it a trial marriage. Stacy and I both slept until noon, or at least until around noon. I woke up first and prepared coffee, then made toast and scrambled eggs for us. We engaged in small talk while eating, and then proceeded to rinse the dishes and load them into the dishwasher. Suddenly the phone rang, and Stacy and I exchanged glances before she answered it. Stacy spoke with her mother, expressing skepticism about her sincerity. She mentioned the ongoing affair with Donald Connolly and emphasized that it wasn't a one-time mistake. Stacy admitted to being the one who urged me to return home, highlighting her mother's neglect and obsession with her affair. Despite her mother's plea not to hurt Mayor Connolly, Stacy refused to comply, indicating her frustration and disappointment. After the call, Stacy remarked on her mother's apparent confusion and lack of understanding regarding the situation. She expressed her concern that her mother didn't grasp the gravity of her actions and couldn't comprehend why I didn't want her to return home. I reassured Stacy that her mother's lack of understanding would become apparent as consequences unfolded. The rest of the day passed quietly, with attempts to distract ourselves from thoughts about Kathy and Mayor Connolly. We discussed Stacy's future plans, with me suggesting she stay in her current environment, despite her concerns about her friends' reactions to her mother's actions. I told her that real friends would stand beside her, but she wasn't convinced. We settled things with my assurance that I'd call my mom to see if Stacy could stay with her until my deployment ended, hopefully in another 5 or 6 months. Late in the afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Kathy. I answered, but as soon as I heard Kathy say, "Bob, oh Bob, please give me a chance to explain," I passed the phone to Stacy without saying a word. "What, Mom?" Stacy's voice was hard and cold, and she held the phone away from her ear so I could hear what her mother was saying. Kathy insisted on speaking with Stacy's father, despite Stacy's resistance. Stacy demanded an explanation for Kathy's actions over the past 6 months, accusing her of betraying their family. Kathy defended herself, claiming she didn't intend to hurt anyone, while Stacy continued to express her disappointment and anger. Throughout their conversation, Kathy could be heard crying. Stacy expressed her hurt and disappointment towards her mother, emphasizing the pain caused to their family due to Kathy's actions. Kathy responded by expressing her love for Stacy and her husband, prompting skepticism from Stacy. Kathy then quietly requested some personal items, including clothes and birth control pills, expressing regret and frustration. Throughout the conversation, Kathy could be heard crying. Stacy sarcastically remarked about Kathy potentially becoming pregnant with the mayor's child and the inconvenience it would pose. She then mentioned packing Kathy's belongings, including clothes and birth control pills, and hinted at Kathy's need for makeup to maintain her appearance as the town's social figure. Stacy concluded by stating that Kathy's belongings would be left at the curb for her to retrieve. After ending the call, Stacy started crying, and I comforted her by wrapping my arms around her. I acknowledged that she had been tough on her mom, but I understood her anger. I assured her that we would overcome this situation together. After giving her another hug, I left her to gather the items her mother needed. I retreated to my office to strategize, drawing on my military training to meticulously plan our next steps. I viewed the situation as a battle that required careful planning and execution. The tasks I needed to handle were mostly straightforward. I planned to hire a divorce lawyer, cancel our joint credit cards, obtain separate credit cards for myself and Stacy, change the beneficiary on my life insurance and retirement plans to Stacy, and transfer half of the funds from our checking and savings accounts to new accounts accessible only by Stacy and me. However, figuring out how to deal with Mayor Connolly posed a greater challenge. I believed he deserved punishment for his actions, and I wanted to ensure he was exposed as the cowardly, wife-stealing individual he truly was. Later that evening, around 8 o'clock, I received a phone call at home. Answering, I identified myself as Robert Crawford. The caller introduced himself as Ray Swanson, a city councilman and a friend of Mayor Connolly. He expressed a desire to discuss what he referred to as a little misunderstanding involving me, my wife, and the mayor the previous night. I found his choice of words concerning, especially considering the gravity of the situation involving my wife and Mayor Connolly's affair. Ray expressed his belief that there was no need for harsh language, suggesting that the situation involved a simple late-night gathering between consenting adults who had perhaps overindulged in drinks. He seemed optimistic that discussing the matter could resolve everything. However, I rebutted, stating that Mayor Connolly had been involved in an affair with my wife for the past 6 months while I was deployed in Afghanistan, and I had caught them together the previous night. Ray acknowledged the difficulty of the situation for me, but hoped we could find a resolution for everyone's benefit. I retorted, questioning who exactly he meant by everyone, emphasizing that my primary concern was for my daughter, and the concerns of others were of little importance to me. Ray expressed his concern, mentioning the mayor's influence in the community and the potential consequences for anyone who caused damage to his reputation. In response, I asked if he was making a threat, to which Ray clarified that he was merely stating the reality of the situation and expressed his reluctance to see damage come to me or my loved ones. I then issued a warning to Ray, urging him to listen attentively. I emphasized my experiences dealing with the Taliban over the past 6 months, indicating that I would not shy away from confronting someone like Mayor Connolly, whom I described as a dishonorable individual involved in stealing another man's wife. I asserted that neither Ray nor the mayor had faced an opponent of my caliber before. I conveyed to Councilman Swanson that I was unfazed by his perceived power and warned him of the consequences of challenging me. I mentioned that my soon-to-be ex-wife neglected to inform the mayor of the repercussions of involving herself with me. Furthermore, I highlighted the extensive support network I had among former military personnel within a 100-mile radius, emphasizing our disdain for individuals who exploit soldiers' spouses during overseas deployments. I advised Councilman Swanson to distance himself from Mayor Connolly to avoid facing the repercussions of his actions, hinting at the impending consequences for the mayor. Ray attempted to negotiate with me, suggesting that a substantial sum of money could resolve the situation. However, I dismissed his proposal, expressing my intense anger towards Donald Connolly for exploiting a soldier's wife while I was deployed. I asserted that no amount of money could alleviate the pain caused to my daughter and me. I insisted that the only resolution satisfactory to me would involve Connolly and my wife experiencing the same pain they inflicted on us. I authorized Ray to convey this message to both of them. Ray expressed his concern, acknowledging the potential fallout from the situation. He sought a resolution to mitigate the consequences. I responded by outlining the steps necessary for resolution, including Connolly publicly admitting to the affair and resigning as mayor. I emphasized that nothing less would prevent me from exposing him and seeking retribution. Ray expressed surprise at the seriousness of my intentions. I assured him of my resolve. Excusing myself, I mentioned needing to prepare dinner for my daughter. Stacy arrived from the garage, informing me that she had placed her mother's belongings by the curb, where they were picked up by an unfamiliar individual driving a black Mercedes. Ray joked about the possibility of the clothes ending up for sale at Goodwill if not collected by the right person. I mentioned that I had packed Stacy's regular clothes, but hesitated to include her fancy nightgowns. I expressed my discomfort at the sight of some particularly provocative teddies she owned. Stacy acknowledged my concern with a nod. I advised her that she would eventually need to address the situation with Stacy, to which she responded that she would do so when the timing felt right. The weekend passed without further incident. Stacy assisted me with laundry, while I focused on my plan to expose Mayor Connolly. On Monday morning, I contacted a contact at the local paper, John Foster, and arranged to meet him for coffee at Danny's. John, a former sergeant in my National Guard company, greeted me warmly. During our conversation, I provided John with some information regarding Mayor Connolly's affair with the wife of one of our soldiers during our deployment in Afghanistan. I refrained from disclosing the soldier's identity, emphasizing the sensitivity of the matter. I stressed that if I were in the soldier's position, I wouldn't want such betrayal to become public knowledge. I shared observations of Connolly's faithful interactions with the soldier's wife, leaving the decision of how to proceed with John. I informed John that, contrary to rumors, the woman involved in the affair was not separated or going through a divorce. Her husband only recently became aware of the situation. I acknowledged John's concern about making baseless accusations against the mayor and the risk of legal action. When asked about evidence of the affair, I presented the pictures and videos I had captured, though I requested that the woman's identity be partially obscured. John understood the implications and appeared uneasy. I expressed my resolve to John, acknowledging that although the truth would eventually surface, I was prepared to confront the shame. I explained that during Connolly's affair with my wife, I was overseas, unaware of the situation. I emphasized to John the betrayal inherent in taking advantage of a soldier's absence by engaging in infidelity with his spouse. John, understanding the gravity of the situation, offered to look into the matter further. After confirming that the affair had persisted throughout my deployment, I transferred the evidence to his cell phone. We briefly reminisced about fallen comrades from our company before parting ways with a handshake. I proceeded with the next step, which involved searching online for a reputable divorce lawyer. After reviewing references, I selected R.J. Collins, ESQ, and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Upon arriving at the office, I was surprised to find that R.J. stood for Revenge Joy, a woman in her 50s with a straightforward demeanor. She wasted no time in asking how she could assist me. I informed her of my need for a divorce, preemptively warning her that it would not be amicable due to my wife's affair with the town mayor during my deployment. She reacted with surprise, dropping the pin she had been holding. I confirmed to Joy that the mayor in question was indeed Connolly, and proceeded to provide her with a detailed account of the situation, which she attentively listened to for the next half hour. She took notes throughout, occasionally pausing to seek clarification or ask questions. When I mentioned my daughter Stacy, Joy inquired about her feelings regarding the matter, to which I explained that she was deeply upset and reluctant to stay with her mother during my deployment. Considering Stacy's age and preferences, Joy suggested the possibility of having her stay with my mother instead. I agreed, and decided to contact my mother to arrange it. Our discussion continued for nearly an hour. I provided Joy with an overview of our financial situation, and she advised me to discuss potential resolutions with my wife. I explained to Joy that witnessing the closeness between my wife and the mayor left no possibility for reconciliation, and I requested that she prepare the divorce papers promptly. Over the following week, Kathy contacted me 5 times, but I kept the conversations brief, promising to update her on the proceedings later. On Friday, Joy informed me that the divorce papers were prepared and required information about where they should be served. I informed Joy that I intended to invite Kathy to my home the following Monday at 2 o'clock, while Stacy was at school, so she could be served with the divorce papers. I called Kathy's cell phone and arranged the meeting for Monday at 2 at the house. Kathy attempted to engage in conversation, seemingly prepared to explain her actions, but I cut her off, stating that she would have the opportunity to speak later. On Monday, Kathy arrived a few minutes early, and we sat down at the kitchen table. Seeing her, I felt a pang of emotion. Despite the circumstances, she looked beautiful. I offered her coffee, but she declined, requesting only water. I acknowledged her desire to speak and assured her that she would have the chance to do so. However, I also informed her that someone would arrive shortly to serve her with the divorce papers. Her expression turned pale. I explained to Kathy that I didn't desire the situation either, just as I hadn't desired her affair with Donald Connolly. I indicated that it seemed neither of us would have things go our way. Kathy pleaded with me to listen to her explanation, expressing hope for a resolution. I agreed to hear her out. She recounted how she had worked on Donald's election campaign and developed a friendship with him during my deployment. Feeling lonely and depressed, she found solace in Donald's companionship. Kathy recalled attending a dinner event with Donald, where he advised her to use her maiden name and leave her wedding rings at home to avoid gossip. She admitted that she hadn't thought much of it at the time, but recognized now that removing her rings was a mistake. That night, Kathy recounted, she mingled with numerous people, all of whom perceived her as a single woman. When I inquired about when the affair began, Kathy admitted that it didn't start immediately, but rather after a night of close dancing and a goodnight kiss when Donald dropped her off. She justified her actions by expressing her loneliness and the allure of being treated like royalty by someone prominent in the community. I confronted Kathy, questioning her decision to engage in such behavior while I was away at war. She acknowledged her wrongdoing and admitted to feeling confused and longing for my presence. Despite my absence, she continued, Donald's company provided her with enjoyment and helped alleviate her feelings of loneliness. Kathy confessed to the increasing frequency of their outings, acknowledging the closeness that developed between them. As the affair progressed, Kathy confessed, they began seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. One evening, after a romantic dinner, Donald invited her back to his place, and despite her initial hesitation, she agreed. Kathy recounted feeling remorseful afterward and insisted that Donald take her home. After ending things with Donald and expressing her love for me, Kathy admitted to reconsidering her decision. Donald, she recounted sadly, had left her alone for some time before reaching out to express his longing for her companionship. He assured her that he missed her and wished to see her again, but only as friends. He apologized for their previous actions and promised not to put her in a compromising situation again. Despite her initial resolve, Kathy confessed that she agreed to see Donald again. The following weekend, Kathy recounted, Donald took her to an unfaithful party at a friend's home on the Bluffs. She described it as a small gathering with only 5 or 6 couples, all of whom were influential individuals in the town. During the event, Kathy was caught off guard when the wife of a prominent doctor inquired about how she managed to capture Donald's attention. Unable to think of a suitable response, Kathy admitted to fabricating a story about being separated from her husband and going through a divorce. The news about Kathy's fabricated separation and impending divorce quickly spread throughout the small town, causing Kathy to feel trapped. During a weekend when our daughter Stacy was away, Kathy spent time with Donald at his home, leading to their ongoing relationship. Kathy expressed deep regret for the pain she caused me and Stacy, acknowledging that her actions were the worst mistake of her life and that she wished she could undo them. However, she admitted that undoing the damage was impossible. When asked about her feelings for Donald, Kathy admitted uncertainty about whether she loved him, but acknowledged enjoying their time together. Despite my probing questions about their closeness and the possibility of marriage, Kathy remained unsure about the future of their relationship. The doorbell rang, and I suggested that it might be for Kathy. She approached the door slowly and confirmed her identity when handed a manila envelope which contained divorce papers. Kathy stood at the door for a while, visibly upset, before closing it and turning to me, tears streaming down her face. She asked if our relationship was truly over, to which I affirmed. Despite her declaration of love, I countered that what she loved was the life we had, which she had discarded. I informed her that our daughter Stacy would stay with my mother until my deployment ended. Kathy broke down in tears, overwhelmed with regret. The following day, the front page of the local newspaper displayed a picture with a headline questioning the identity of a married woman leaving a hotel room with Mayor Connolly. The photo showed Kathy and the mayor kissing as they exited room 1114, accompanied by a caption questioning whether her husband, serving in Afghanistan, was aware of the situation. The article described the charity event attended by the pair, and hotel records confirming the mayor's reservation of the room for the night. Additionally, the couple was photographed leaving the room at 2 in the morning. The article also mentioned unverified rumors of regular meetings over the past 6 months between the woman and the mayor, while her husband was deployed in Afghanistan. The newspaper asserted its editorial right to bring the story to light, given the man's stature and the offense against a soldier stationed in Damage's Way, causing a significant uproar. Within minutes of the story reaching people's doorsteps, the mayor's office entered damage control, asserting the story was entirely fabricated. They claimed Mayor Connolly would never jeopardize any marriage, especially that of a soldier serving his country overseas. They contended that the photograph was an obvious fake, attributing the situation to unnamed sinister individuals targeting the mayor. A promised press conference later that afternoon aimed to set the record straight. Unfortunately, over the past 6 months, too many people had seen Connolly and Kathy together, displaying affection in public. One by one, his friends and supporters began distancing themselves. Several people anonymously phoned the newspaper to confess they knew for a fact that the couple had been having an affair because they'd witnessed it on more than one occasion, expressing outrage to discover that the woman's husband was deployed in the army while the affair was taking place. That afternoon, Mayor Connolly held his news conference, but none of his friends on the city council stood by him. In fact, the only people backing him up were his staff, and even half of them were strangely missing. The newspaper and TV stations were present, recording the entire event. As Connolly expressed horror at being accused of such an unthinkable thing, he assured everyone that he and the woman were merely acquaintances and had never done anything to bring shame upon them or the woman's husband. Halfway through his speech, Kathy pushed her way through the onlookers and reached the microphone. In an act of defiance, Kathy revealed her identity, stating, "My name is Kathy Crawford. I am the wife of Army Major Robert Crawford, and for the past 6 months, I have been having an affair with Mayor Connolly." Connolly tried to dismiss her, claiming he didn't know her and calling her a liar. Kathy confronted him, expressing shame and heartbreak, accusing him of pursuing her despite knowing she was married and her husband was in Afghanistan. Tearfully, she apologized to her husband through the TV cameras and left while reporters bombarded the mayor with questions. He turned and stormed back into City Hall. I must confess that exposing all of that to the world damaged my already fragile ego. However, I was aware of the risk I was taking when I approached John Foster, my newspaper contact, the next day. This occurred when the president of the city council announced the mayor's resignation and declared that the council would govern the city until a new mayoral election could be held. While I should have felt satisfaction, all I experienced was a profound, empty loneliness. Loneliness consumed me, and I missed my wife more than I had ever thought possible. That afternoon, my reporter friend called to inform me that Connolly had packed up and left town without leaving a forwarding address, and my soon-to-be ex-wife hadn't accompanied him. During the remaining days of my leave, I spent as much time as possible with my daughter. In the last week, I allowed Kathy to move back into the house. Stacy and I traveled to my mother's home 60 miles away, where I enrolled her in school, promising to return and get her as soon as my deployment was over. The following week, I was on a plane back to Afghanistan, my heart filled with burning anger that I intended to unleash on the enemy lurking in the desert. What happened to Kathy? A few weeks later, she moved in with Connolly, and they too departed from town. Did Robert return from Afghanistan? Yes, but he suffered critical injuries, and his daughter assisted him in getting back on his feet. He lost one of his legs in an ambush. Currently, he works as a design specialist for a large electronics firm, residing with his daughter. Occasionally, he speaks about the challenges faced by soldiers who have served duty outside the country,